Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Contemplative Science podcast. My name is Jamie, and as always, I am pleased to be joined by my co host, Dr. Mark Miller. Mark, how are you, man?
I'm very good. And, we get lots of people on this show, and usually I get to talk with people that I've never met before. But it's always such a delight when we get somebody on the show who's a colleague and a friend. So that's today. I've got somebody that I'm actually very close to on the show today, which I'm excited to get into a conversation with.
Yeah, so today we're incredibly lucky to be joined by Richmond Stace. Now, Richmond is a pioneer of pain coaching for chronic pain. He is a physiotherapist, a humanitarian, a lecturer, author, and in fact a fellow podcaster. He is releasing Understand and Overcome Your Chronic Pain, and we are absolutely delighted to have him today. Richmond, how are you?
Yeah, good. Look, great to be here. Great to see you guys. It's so funny because I've listened to you so much, and now here we are. Obviously, Mark, I've known you for a long time, but Jamie, I feel like I know you.
Well, I'm flattered and I'm buzzing that you're here. We're going to get through a number of different and at times misunderstood elements of pain, but I want to start sort of at the top, and this is a tricky sort of question in some ways. What is pain? How do you characterize it if an alien came down who didn't feel pain? What are the mechanics here?
Yeah, you start with the easy ones, don't you? I mean, that's an amazing.
Yeah, just give us an account. Just give us an account of the
Yeah,
phenomenology of pain.
yeah. Well, that I mean, that's the ultimate question, isn't it? And that's what people want to know, where they know what it is because they're sort of feeling it. But when you start exploring it and look under the hood, there's just this immense complexity. And of course, what we've done is, particularly with the biomedical model, is oversimplified it into making it somehow relate to some anatomy or structural thing or injury or pathology. That's the common way. Someone says my back hurts, and so all the focus goes onto the back and then gets micro into maybe discs or a bit of the disc or whatever. In my view, the more you do that, the further away you actually come from the experience because it's the person, the whole person in their live world having that experience, which is affecting the way that they see the world, experience it, the way they think, obviously the way their body feels. So all of this is relevant to the pain experience. Um, does that answer the question? What is pain? There's an official definition which I'm not a huge fan of. It doesn't even talk about a person. That's the IAS definition. Don't ask me to quote it because I never remember what it is. People can look it up, but it talks about it. I know bits of it. It talks about an emotional and sensory experience, sort of with or without tissue damage. But there's a person, and I think it's the whole complexity of being human that is really what pain's about. I mean, I often describe it's a bit like love. It's these feelings you can't see, but how do we get a grip on it?
To that point, to what degree do you see pain as a feedback mechanism? To what degree is its role or purpose? Because you have the obvious example when you're trying to explain to kids, well, why do you need to feel pain? And you say, well, if there's a hot stove and you leave your hand on it, you're going to be in trouble without pain. Does that analogy run the whole way through for you?
No, because I'd say that although pain, whether it's because I've just put my hand on something hot or stubbed my toe or fallen down a hole, um, is still a lived experience being generated as I see it top down. The tissues themselves don't have the ability to produce pain, of course. So if I sprain my ankle and injure it right now, those ligaments, muscles, nerves, bones, etc., they don't have the ability to produce an experience. Something else has to generate a best guess of what's going on down there, and I feel that. But I also think a load of stuff. So that's what I mean by it's not just a feeling. It's not just this sort of sensation or perception. There's all these other things going on that are equally part of it. So, I mean, taking from more of a Buddhist stance, there's a set of conditions that must be met in order to feel that exact pain in that exact moment. So there's a real idiosyncratic nature in the fact that that person is feeling pain in that moment. That's not the same as that person feeling it the next moment. And it certainly can't be the same as another person doing the same the same thing. So that's why we have this utter complexity. With more chronic pain, there's usually less and less of any kind of good relationship with what's going on in the tissues, much more to do with the overall circumstances and perhaps lots of different kinds of processing and very strong priors coming through there, kind of tipping the balance towards previous experiences of pain to explain now, rather than what is perhaps actually going on biologically, which might not be a huge amount.
Wow.
Right. I mean, it's interesting, right? Because you've just, I guess, drawn a distinction between pain that reflects what's happening. So if my hand is kind of on the hot plate, there's some obvious superficial relationship between the hot plate and the pain I'm feeling in my fingertips. But then you're saying in cases of chronic pain, there might be something, or rather, a higher percentage of the pain can be explained, if you want to be causal about it, by referencing a set of priors or set of conditions. Am I right in guessing that those priors are very often not physical?
Yeah, because they're not happening now. It's, it's expectations, it's anticipation, it's beliefs about pain that you've built up over, forever. From when that first time you banged your head or something, and mum gave you a hug, or you went to the doctor because you had a sore throat, all of that. But actually, I still, it was interesting hearing what you were saying there, sort of reflecting back what I described. I wouldn't make too much distinction. There's not like a cut-off point. The textbooks say 3 months and you've got chronic pain. I mean, that's nonsense. It's not like the clock ticks over midnight, bang, now you're chronic pain. But that's sort of how it's described. But that's totally illogical. Because a lot of the things that happen early on when someone has something, I call it a pain moment, because you can have an injury, but it doesn't mean you feel the pain straight away. Look at all the sporting situations where people, come off the field and find out they've broken something. Or, I mean, I had a situation when I was doing an ultra once. I put my foot down a divot, and it was like, ooh, and that was about 40k. At about 80k, I was like, ooh, my ankle's a bit sore, and kind of looked down, and it was a bit swollen. I thought, oh god, I put my foot down a divot, and as you do, you deal with it in various ways to just do that last bit. But then the next morning, boom, bruised and swollen and all the rest of it. So yeah, not there doesn't ever have to be a really good relationship. I mean, pain and injury are completely different anyway. Pain is subjective; you can't see it. An injury is there; it's measurable. You can see something.
Yeah, there is this phenomenology problem because if you're saying that pain is obviously different to injury and it's a subjective experience, it's not obvious that the pain I feel is the pain that you feel, in the same way that I'm not sure that the colour red I see is the colour red that you see. And I guess in the art of treating pain and managing pain and understanding pain, you sort of have to manage that phenomenology.
Yeah, very, very much so, because that's all we have, isn't it? Our experience of what it's like. So, when I ask someone, or when we first meet, for example, and they're telling me their story, that story is what they've got to work with. And we know that our memories are not so reliable. They're full of bias, and maybe a lot of those memories, particularly if they've had pain for a long time, maybe they're not very accurate. Maybe it's sort of this model that's been built up over time, which they've come to hinge everything on, is not actually that reflective of what's really going on. Often people are doing a lot better than they think. So they say, I can't do this, I can't do that, da, da, da. And I say, yeah, but you've arrived here. You're dressed. You've had a shower. You've travelled. But it doesn't come onto the radar because that doesn't fit the story. Now, that's not saying that people are making things up or anything like that. This is what happens, and I'm always at pains to say that to people, that what you tell me, I totally, that's what we're working with. But because of the way that our perception works, because as humans, this is what happens. We're not always experiencing what is happening. It's like a map and a territory thing going on here.
Wow. So one thing I find so interesting here is if pain has a really strong element of belief as part of it, and that can be subpersonal, subconscious belief, what we believe about ourselves, so the way that the system is set up relative to what's happened in the past, then how, as a pain coach, do you engage? Because now it's not only about physical manipulation. It's not about massage. It's not about holding a part of the knee together. It seems like now there's really what you need a coach for is to update your way of being in the world rather than something just to do with the actual physical body. It's so fascinating to me, and it really is what we're interested in here in this podcast too, which is this coming together of the physical and the scientific and also the contemplative, and thinking about how we might structure our beliefs. I'd just love to hear a little bit more about this.
Yeah, no, no, absolutely. Those beliefs about that stuff that people tell themselves about their own situations is, I think, really powerful. I really work hard to see the whole person.
Yeah,
We talk
yeah,
about, I have real issue with terms like mental health because I think it's very suggestive of this separation, which there can't be. I know some
nice.
people say it's kind of convenient to talk, but it's wrong. It's we need to
Yeah,
evolve.
yeah,
I mean, I see where how it's got
mm,
there, but we need to evolve to see whole person health. And and when the person, which they can, and I got this word from you, Mark, jostle, and I use it a lot, so thank you, to jostle these sticky beliefs in different ways. It could be pure. A lot of it could be through conversation. Skillful motivation interviewing style conversations about change, where they come up with reasons why they might change something or update their thinking on reflection, having something reflected back, or it could be through meditation, or it can be through experience. So setting up various experiments where they work what I would call within their window of tolerance. So we set the bar low and really try and maximize the chances that they're successful with whatever it is they're doing. It could be a walk, it could be getting out of a chair, it could be going for a coffee. It doesn't matter what it is. And we use those principles across the board because if you work within your window of tolerance and keep having successes, that starts to change how the world looks because now
yeah.
suddenly you're going, and it does seem that more recent stuff holds a bit more sway than, oh, I did that 3 months ago. No, I've just done it. I've just been to the coffee shop. um, but they might start by saying, "Oh no, I couldn't do that. I couldn't." I say, "Well, why not?" "Well, I can't get there." "Could someone give you a lift?" "Well, maybe." "Okay, well, that's the first thing. Someone can give you a lift." "Well, yeah, but if I get there, I can't. I can only sit there for 15 minutes." I say, "Well, how about 10?" "Well, yeah, I can sit there for 10." "All right, let's do 10." Yet let's use living as a way of getting better. So this is the radical. Well, I call it radical, but to me, it's not radical at all. It's just common sense. Let's use living let's use living to get better because the more you focus on pain, the worse the outcome. The more you focus on the person, what they want, and how to get there each day, the steps to take, the better the outcome. To me, it's not rocket science.
Well, and one more thing I just say is so good. I love that your role, one of your roles, and I really appreciate you using complex language so that we don't become overly reductive here. But I love that one of the ways you can coach and support people who have chronic pain is by locating where do they feel stuck, and then subtly putting pressure against those stuck beliefs so that they update in their own time. Like, well, I'm in so much pain. I'm in pain all day. And then you just in a very like compassionate and human way say, well, are you in pain right now? How about now? How about then? How about when we do
Yeah.
this? And then they start getting evidence like, oh, wait. No, I'm not in excruciating pain right now, but I am when I go like this or something. You say, well, hold on. Don't do that yet. Are we in pain now? No. Okay. 1 second ago, the belief was I'm always in pain. And now with a really subtle, just look here, already you're getting counter evidence for this story that the world is one way rather than another. And I mean, I don't have anything more to say about it, but I love this idea of using living life as the pathway to becoming better at living life. I think that's just excellent. Yeah, what can you do? And can we start getting some counter evidence just from the way you live your life?
Yeah.
Fascinating.
I mean, you do meet resistance, of course, because people will say, "Well, I'm trying to live," and I understand that they'll get frustrated, they'll get annoyed. That resistance, that's the work. Where this stuff comes up, that's the thing to help people to reposition on, because people know that they want to get better. They know they want to be healthier and stronger and fitter and all this stuff. They know that, and they know why, because they want to play with the kids. They want to go back to work. They want to walk to the end of the garden, whatever it is. They just don't know how. And the how is the key, the know-how. So I spend a lot of time going into real detail and the nuances of being present, so that they can make these best decisions in that moment about how much to do, when to stop, how to really maximize the chances that they're successful. Because if you focus on what you want, you're really pushing up the probabilities that that's going to happen. It's not 100%, because people say, oh, will you definitely this, will you definitely that? I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball. I can't tell the future, but I know that if you focus on those things and you put that on your mental pinboard, you have a clear picture of success that you're working towards, and you commit to living a particular life and use these skills to do so, you're going to follow that path, and the insights will come. If you focus on what you don't want, i.e. pain, even if you're saying, I don't want pain, well, pain's the big deal there. It's like, don't think of elephants. You're 100% going to get that.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
I can't help but ask. I play no cricket at all, and every time we have a knockabout in the park and the ball hits my hand, because I've been dragged there and I kind of don't want to be there, it really hurts. But my friends who are in theory having the same physical experience, the same cricket ball hitting roughly the same hand at a similar pace, are much more cool with it. And if you flip the sport, all of a sudden I can take a knock in football and feel like there's a meaning behind the pain, or a wider context which makes the pain physically less painful. What is there to be said around the context that the pain happens in, and the meaning we're subjectively giving that context?
Yeah, I mean, look, context is king. Yeah, there has to be a context, doesn't there? So, the people who play cricket, who've been hit on the hand a million times, because that's what happens. That you're used to it. It's in the model, isn't it? It's because it's still, it can hurt like hell, but it's a bit like a carpenter, whacking his thumb with a hammer versus me. It's a very different experience. Or the electrician who gets electrocuted versus me. So yeah, that backstory, those expectations. It's not when you get kicked in football in the shin, or someone takes you down from behind. It's no big surprise, particularly if you've played against them before, and hey, there's that guy. He likes to slide tackle from behind, all that. So yeah,
So in
you know
essence,
the deal.
your predictive models have already included the expectation of that pain, and therefore it has a subjective experience of less suffering.
Yeah, to a degree. I mean, of course, the predictive model is a nice way of, particularly, cricket, because if you think, I mean, even at amateur level, the ball's coming at a speed that you wouldn't be able to react to. You've got to have some kind of model that exists, that you can position and move your body in this complex way to hit the ball. So when you play a shot, so you're trying to match the line of the ball, the trajectory of the ball. So you're predicting that. But if the ball hits a crack, or hits a little bit of grass and then deviates a little, then there's your mismatch, there's your error, and you've nicked it and you're out, or you missed it. So there's still plenty of room for that to happen in sport. Um,
I was reading some research that was basically demonstrating that when you have people with chronic pain think about or anticipate the pain coming, the pain neurons fire even before kind of the structure is doing the thing that would cause them to fire. What is the relationship between anticipating pain, and the actual pain neurons firing? And is there anything that's like slightly misunderstood about that relationship?
yeah, I mean, I think we're pretty certain that if you anticipate something's going to hurt, it's much more likely to, and will hurt more. So if you think about something that happens every day, someone having jabs, vaccination, particularly kids having vaccinations. I was a nurse originally, and one of the classic things you would say is, "Little scratch coming." It feels nothing like a scratch. I don't know why scratch. Have a hit. So you're priming them, aren't you? You're priming them, um, which seems bizarre now when I think about it. At the time, that's just that's what you did. Maybe it was people having fun. But yeah, there's something about anticipation that so someone might say, "Oh no, I can't bend over because if I do that, it's going to hurt. Now they're using past experiences, of course, of that happening over and over and over. They're predicting the conscious prediction here as opposed to subconscious in the systems. They're predicting that, well, if I do that, that's going to hurt. So that's a story, isn't it? It's a story. So we're in, part of our work is to help the person update their story because it hasn't actually happened. The future never happens anyway, of course. But if you keep telling yourself that story, it becomes real. I mean, I'm a big fan of Derren Brown, the kind of illusionist guy. And he talks a lot about this, actually. I mean, he bases a lot of his work on the fact that he's playing with people's stories and expectations. It's a great kind of show to watch live and see this in action.
Yeah, it's really potent. This like the impact of what you believe in your story on your experience. I had a lunch one time with a doctor who told me I don't know how ethical this is, but that using placebo in the medical office, and said there's a medication that we know gives people upset tummy, and he's like, I just tell them that if you get an upset tummy, that means this medication is really working. And he goes, and we've done experiments now on using just this phraseology, knowing that this pill gives you an upset stomach, and when you have an upset stomach, you tell them, well, that's actually that means you're one of the people that this one really works on. That actually, indeed, it does make them better more often than not. And just that small prime, just to say you can expect this to happen, and when that happens, that cues that something else beneficial is happening, then the beneficial thing tends to happen. Amazing thing that placebo works like this, that your
Yeah.
actual your beliefs impact your actual real world experience. It just lends credence to like what you believe really matters. It's not just some secondary interesting thing, but rather it's central to
Yeah.
your well-being, the sorts of things you believe about yourself.
Yeah, completely, completely. And as soon as you take that on board, it opens up so much opportunity, not just for pain, but for people's beliefs about themselves, their self-worth, self-confidence, their belief in, what they're doing work-wise or relationships and all that stuff they're telling themselves. There's so much sort of therapy and work that goes on around that, but we're essentially talking about the same thing. And when you look at the things that humans get stuck with, chronic pain, addiction, depression, anxiety, these really sticky problems. And I know, Mark, you've looked at a number of these coming through the PP lens. They're just different manifestations of this kind of very rich information coming from experience, very much embodied. Um, and if we can switch people into seeing that as an opportunity, stuff's happening, stuff has happened, there's suffering, but if we can see that as the opportunity rather than be helpless in the face of it, and people will need support around that, and I'm being quite general, I know that, but then I think it just opens up a whole gamut of ways of helping people, and the idiosyncratic nature of all of these experiences that we were saying before, I think it extend also to depression, anxiety, and everything else. So we need a big toolbox. We need a big bunch of ways to help people because we need to find the ways that are going to help that person in this moment.
Yeah.
Should we chat just briefly about running? Because running is a deeply psychological sport. You run into your own perceived limits and occasionally find out that those aren't really the case. And never is that more true when it comes to pain. Now, you mentioned earlier you've done an ultra. For people listening, what is an ultra?
So an ultra marathon is anything beyond the normal marathon, if you like. So in theory, you could do a normal marathon and then jog back to the car and say you've done an ultra. And some people have done that. But yeah, no. So it might be 50k. A short ultra would be 50k. But usually they're on trails, so there's a lot of up and down and or over mountains and that sort of thing. So you can do them on the flat as well, but they're kind of less interesting.
What's your work in pain, or rather, how has your work in pain changed your relationship with the pain you feel 55 kilometers into a run?
Well, I got into ultras a few years ago, and ended up, it wasn't a conscious decision to do this, but ended up doing a monthly ultra for 2 years. I did it kind of in the name of Understand Pain, which is kind of this sort of social enterprisey thing that I've had going, and I called it Up and Run, and it was a way of raising awareness of pain, chronic pain. But it also turned out to be my own laboratory. Um, there's a phrase. It comes. I'm trying to think of the runner. It comes from Zach, called the Pain Cave. The Pain Cave. I don't know if you've heard of the Pain Cave. Some people want to go into the Pain Cave. Now, the Pain Cave is a pretty dark, hellish sort of place, as the name implies. But it strips you back. Really, you experience every emotion in that day or however long you're running. I mean, there's some ultras going for days and days now, but you just go through it all. It's a phenomenal experience. And I did one. The last one I did. No, the last one I did was for medical aid for Palestinians, but that was sort of just along the Thames. That was flat. That was quite straightforward. But the one before that, where was sort of towards my retirement, because it does take its toll. Although you can always come out of retirement. It was called the Ring of Fire. And it's a 3-day run around Anglesey, so it's 135 miles, and it's very up and down. I mean, it's beautiful, but you just have the most amazing experience with other people. You know, I've met some people that you just bond with in a completely unique way. I can't even describe it. I try and work out how, why, what happens, but there's just something so human about this suffering together, you know, running through the night for hours, trying to find your way around all this stuff up and down and think you're there, and then it's still another 2K and it feels like 200K. You know, it's just all these things happen. It's amazing. It's amazing. But it does tell you a lot about how we experience things and the importance of how you relate to it and the skills you can bring to that, how you can meet it, how you can meet your suffering. And that's been really revealing.
One thing I hear there is you are training a high level belief that says pain is valuable in some contexts. It can produce good relationships. This pain cave can strip you back to your essential nature. That's good stuff. That's already pitched. I mean, it's funny you say pain cave, which comes with all these negative connotations, but right on the back of it is it strips you back to who you are. It gives you a chance to meet and learn about yourself. I mean, if you've become the kind of person that has that high level belief that that's all good stuff, then none of that can ever tip you into learned helplessness. Now, it will never be completely overwhelming, because big experiences of pain are now contextualized under an umbrella of potentially extremely useful. And you're really training at that edge. It's a remarkable thing to do in training. I mean, I'm so inspired right now. What a great way to gain control over something that ordinarily spins us into uncontrollability. It's wonderful.
Yeah. Yeah, you push into those zones. I don't mean in terms of, you know, speed or anything like that. I just mean that you're on that edge, and you've got to explore it. And that, you know, when you bring that into day-to-day living, and the mild inconveniences that occur, you know, it just gives you a whole different perspective on that, and what people are capable of.
Yeah. You know, there is a little bit of a discussion today about the detriments of losing initiations in our culture, where you're put through something grueling or challenging or hard, especially at a young age or at these liminal moments between being young and being old, or being immature to being mature. And one of the values of that is it helps calibrate the system so that it's not overly sensitive. Like you say, like the day-to-day pains you're going under are nothing compared to running 135 miles over 3 days. I mean, they're not even in the same ballpark, which means basically you can turn the volume, you get calibrated correctly. Those pains get contextualized in the right way, which is probably not all that important. You don't really need to be putting your mind so much on those little pains, because you really know what it's like to struggle. And I think it's the same thing we see with lots of people who have lived through real struggle have like moved to another country from a war-torn country or are still experiencing war. And to see, I mean, I have lots of anecdotal examples in my life of meeting people who have had those experiences, and they're so cool with ordinary issues because they're like, yeah, but like it's not like this. I mean, you're talking about a traffic ticket. I'm not going to fight anybody for a traffic ticket. That's not that big of a deal. I'm from Soviet Russia or something when it was real bad and real hot.
Mm.
So yeah, very cool.
Yeah. I mean, I guess there's, that's a very different context to, a lot of people who are suffering chronic pain for a whole bunch of other reasons. I'm very lucky that I'm able or have been able to do that kind of thing. And that kind of practice of gratitude to me is very important to keep my feet on the floor and to remember that
Yeah,
there's a lot of people that don't have the kinds of bodies that would allow them to perhaps do that.
yeah,
Um,
sure.
so
I'm interested in sort of the lessons that you've learned over pain throughout your career. What the low hanging fruit is for people listening who are suffering with chronic pain, and what the generalizable low hanging fruit places to start might be.
Yeah, I mean, I think my first instinct was to not answer that question, actually, was to, well, answer that question, but more for clinicians. A lot of the stuff
Nice.
that I apply now, I I learned through my some very compassionate tutors I had when I was training to be a nurse. I went from being at boarding school, that kind of lifestyle, to training to be a nurse. So it was a real eye opener, kind of real world stuff, and I made it my business to see all sorts of things, and had some amazing people who influenced me at that time. And although I knew I wasn't going to be a nurse forever, it set me up and set me on this journey. So I'm really grateful for that because they trained me to see a person. So I remember basic things like we were taught how to shave a man. Um, I mean, you might think, well, big deal, but that could be really important for someone, and to be able to do it properly, not cut them all up or leave half clumps of. So really basic stuff, and basic care, and that's always stuck with me because it was quite hard to do that initially, that sort of stuff, and basic care, if you know what I mean. But having done that again, it just puts a whole new perspective on things. So the low hanging fruit for clinicians, and when I do mentoring and stuff, is always say the same things: see the person, always see a whole person. Then you're starting on the right track. But equally, that could be for the person suffering pain to realise that it's them as a whole in their lived world with all these experiences that they've had. I often say it's taken you your whole life to arrive at this moment, and everything that's happened to you is shaping how you are and how you're thinking about it right now. Well, it sort of blows you away a little bit. But knowing that pain is not adhered to some sort of structure, pathology, etc., and that the body tissues don't generate these experiences. Although this is much more complex than perhaps if they did, it's much more empowering because there's so many more things that you can do, and that's really cool. And as I said, thinking right, how can you live life? What brings you joy? How can you commit to living a life of joy? And someone might say, well, how on earth can I live a life of joy when I'm in agony? That's a story. That's a story you're telling yourself. We can work on that. We can work on that because you can feel joy. We just need to switch your radar to look for it. It's just your radar's kind of moved away from that for however long. Could be years. We need to get that back on the agenda. Let's look at some ways. Let's think of the grandkids. What music do you love? I don't listen to music anymore. Why not? Let's put some on. Can you make a few dance moves? Whatever it is, it doesn't matter. It just as long as it matters to that person. If we're linking what they're doing, even if it's the tiniest thing with their highest values, bang, you've got energy in the room. It's amazing the transformations you can see like that. Not because there's any magic to it. It's just helping people to see how, the big how.
Yeah, there is something really to be said for as soon as you're doing the linking between an activity that someone's genuinely caring about and is in their highest values. I love that way of putting it. Somehow the incentives internally are to fix the thing, whereas when you can't see, you're just in pain and the world is pain. It's very difficult internally to in the truest sense, want joy. Of course, you want joy in a superficial way, but if you're not psychologically, your subconscious isn't making the link between going to the bottom of the garden and the things you really care about. It sounds like that's how you get stuck in a really difficult spot.
Yeah, if that keeps happening, if you keep doing, look, this is Mark stuff. If you keep doing worse than expected, or not doing as well as you think you should, the expectation reality mismatch is playing a big role. Helping people to see things as they are. I mean, this again is where meditation, mindful practices are so good, because that to me is helping people to see things more clearly, to create that little bit of space so that they can relate. Because it's not about so much about what's happening, but how you relate to it that matters. Because what's happening is already happening. I say this to people that, if you're in pain right now, it's already happening. You're in pain. There's nothing you can do about that. That doesn't sound great, but there isn't. There's nothing you can do about what's already happening. Like, you can hear my voice. There's nothing you can do about that. Sorry about that. But how you relate to it and what you do next, that's the bit that you can get really skillful at. Plus, you can be doing these things, developing your day-to-day practice, which is full of whatever skills and strategies they are, to be shaping different ways that your systems can work. So, bringing in breathing, bringing in moving, bringing in meditation, bringing in, activities that you love doing, reconnecting with people that matter, reconnecting with your purpose. All of these things, they're all skills which you can hone. And it's up and down, but will help you to deal with those ups and downs. So you start surfing those waves a bit more rather than being knocked over by them so much. So this is kind of different overlapping themes that we can bring in with skills of being well and day-to-day skills. If someone's practicing their exercises and all that sort of, because often people are just, do these exercises as if that's going to get you better from, this sort of thing. Okay, I do my exercises. That takes 10 minutes. What about the other 16 hours? How do I make best decisions about what to do? So they need to know all that. That's the big how. How do I live my life in the best way according to how things are now, but pointed towards where I want to go, and being really clear on that.
Richmond, what's the biggest misconception that you find, not necessarily clinicians, but people in the public and people suffering with pain have about it?
Well, I think that things like there's something structural, there's something to be fixed, something can be done to me, as opposed to it's akin to learning. Overcoming pain is a learning process. There's certain things we all say this. We all say things. How are you doing? Oh, it's the same. And actually, one thing I often try and bring in is humor. I think that's a great jostler at the right time, and you've got to have a connection. So right at the beginning, you have to form a connection with the person as well. I mean, that's fundamental. But nothing can ever be the same because each moment's different. So that's impossible. Nothing can ever be the same. So we talk about that. So impermanence in Buddhist terms. And the other thing people often say is, "Oh, I've gone backwards." And I say, "Well, do you have a time machine then?" Uh, Again, humour. I'm not being facetious, because you can't go back in time, can you? And we try and have a bit of a laugh about that, and I try and help them to come up with something else. It's a bit like today a lady, she was referring to her bad leg, and I said, "Why are you calling it a bad leg? Is it being naughty?" It's your left leg. Cool. Try calling it your left leg. Oh, okay. And we had a bit of a laugh about that.
That's good. That's good.
It's just changing the story. And the third thing that people often think is that if they have more pain, classically called a flare-up, I'm not sure about that terminology, but that's kind of what it's called. Oh, I shouldn't have done that. I made a bad choice. I made a bad decision. I said, no, you didn't. You made a good decision. You just didn't get the outcome you wanted. And you have no control over outcomes, by the way. You only have control over what you do. You did the right thing at that time. You chose to go out with your friends or to go and do this or do that. It was a good decision because it showed that you're willing. It showed your systems are open to doing stuff. You just didn't get the result you wanted, which was being, pain-free or minimal pain. So that doesn't mean you made the wrongs, because then they won't do it again. And you say, okay, well, let's look at how you did it. Maybe we can shape how you did it a bit, change it a little.
Right there, exactly. You can make the same decision, but let's toggle how you did it rather than not make that decision. Rather than being burned by being open, now let's find a good way to be open so that you can be open and get the results that you want. Oh, that's sharp, Richmond. It's so sharp. Wow, you're such a wise dude. I just want to say that before I close. This has just been such a good chat, and I'm just really grateful that we know you and that you were able to share some of this stuff. That's very wise. This has
Thank you.
been a really wise pod.
Cool.
Yeah.
No, thanks, guys. No, it's
Richmond,
been great to chat.
where can everyone find you online?
I'm pretty active on social media. My Instagram, I post a couple of things. I post on this stuff all the time. So pain coach on Instagram, pain physio on Twitter. I'm on LinkedIn and Facebook. But yeah, you'll find me if you put my name in. And my website's got some stuff on. So, and I've got the podcast, but that's me talking to other cool people like Mark. About his stuff. He's been on a couple of times.
We'll definitely link all of this. If the people at home haven't bumped into Richmond's podcast yet, it's awesome. So we'll share a link there.
Excellent.
Richmond, thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks, guys. Great to see you.
This has been the Contemplative Science podcast. Thank you for listening. Thank you for subscribing, and I hope you enjoyed that half as much as we did. Ciao, ciao. See you next week.